Kurt Johnson,
Here.
Ross Driven, Spurlock. Here. Moore,
Here.
Perez. Here. Kim.
Here.
Carney.
Here.
Meeting called to order, 7:08 p.m.
Thank you, Lanye. Today we're going to be reviewing our hearing. Can I get a motion to begin the hearing?
I move that the Board of Education of Oak Park Elementary School District 97 move into open session with a public hearing on the district's FY25 amended budget.
Thank you, Joe.
Second.
Kurt Johnson,
Yes.
Ross Driven,
Yes.
Spurlock,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Perez,
Yes.
Kim,
Yes.
Carney.
Yes.
Motion to open the hearing on the FY25 amended budget. We have no public comment for record related to the,
Thank you, Lanye.
We have public comment.
for the budget.
Say that again.
I move that the Board of Education of Oak Park Elementary School, District 97, close the public hearing on the district's FY25 amended budget.
Second.
Ross Driven,
Yes.
Spurlock,
Yes.
Kurt Johnson,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Perez,
Yes.
Kim,
Yes.
Carney.
Yes.
Motion to adjourn has passed.
Now we move on to public comment. Sorry, I was trying to log into the system. Moving to public comment. Do we have any public comment?
I'll go first.
Nick Benatti?
You say that first, it's up to you. I'll go first.
So good evening, everyone. My name is Nick Benatti, Oak Park resident, former D97 dad. I trust that the board members reviewed my email from the last week regarding the serious ethics breach that occurred between a D200 school board member, Gina Harris, who happened to be a D97 employee at the time, a corporation known as Begin and Circle, and a wealthy school booster. I'm here requesting school board assistance on two things regarding this matter. So in my investigation of the incident, I submitted a FOIA to D200 requesting email communications between the parties involved in the school district. That request uncovered that an employee of Begin and Circle solicited money directly from a D200 employee. It was just another red flag in a series of red flags regarding this matter. I then submitted the same FOIA request to D97, but was told that request would be unduly burdensome with more than 1,000 responsive records. I then narrowed the scope a little bit. I was told that request was also unduly burdensome. So you can understand my concern that, considering the context of my investigation, that thousands of records exist. I'm attempting to ascertain the district's knowledge of Ms. Harris's involvement with the Begin and Circle Corporation and the practice of D97 employees offering their services back to the school district through third parties from which they are also compensated. Now that the district is aware of the full context of my request, I ask that someone work with me on fulfilling that request in a way that would not be burdensome and would further my investigation. The second issue I have is separate but related. In my research, it was revealed that Gina Harris is on a long-term leave from D97. That leave was first granted for the 23-24 school year, then extended to cover the 24-25 school year, but it appears it has not yet been extended to cover the 25-26 school year. I ask that the school board put any extension or renewal of this leave on hold, not just in the investigation of this incident, but to re-examine the practice of offering this specific type of open-ended leave in general. Gina Harris left the school district to take a highly paid executive role with another organization in 2023. To my knowledge, she has not indicated a return date. 2 years is more than enough time to figure out if you like your new job or not, and to let your former employer know if and when you plan to return. Make no mistake, this unlimited and indefinite long-term leave comes at a cost. First, it's overly burdensome to the school district that must keep a position open for an indefinite amount of time for an employee who has given no indication they'll return or when they'll return. And if they do indeed return, it's most likely going to be at a higher salary that doesn't correlate with the actual classroom or pertinent experience that person has for the role. It is unfair to fellow D97 teachers and staff who could be displaced upon this person's spontaneous return to the district while also denying a job opportunity to other deserving candidates. It's unfair to former district employees who also left the district for new job opportunities, but were not afforded the same consideration. And if my assumptions are correct about how this specific leave is structured, it is also unfair to taxpayers, both in our park and statewide, who are forced to pick up the cost. And yes, even though Ms. Harris is not on the payroll and on unpaid leave from the district, there is indeed a financial cost to her specific type of leave. And again, I'd be happy to work with anyone offline, whether it be the school board members or someone in the administration, to help explain some of these points further, if necessary. But in summary, this is not volunteering for the Peace Corps, it's not serving in the armed forces, it's not tending to a sick child or an elderly parent. Someone took a lucrative executive role with another employer and is using the taxpayer-funded education system as some sort of career fallback or safety net. That is not our responsibility. The district has gone above and beyond in patience and generosity in this matter. I ask that D97 request a return date for Ms. Harris that is in the short term, preferably one that corresponds with the beginning of the next school year. If one cannot be given, I ask that D97 officially terminate Harris's leave of absence. And in addition, I also ask that the district re-examine this long-term leave policy specifically for anyone else who might be in this type of leave or has been granted this type of leave as well. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you provide your comments to Lyon?
Oh, yeah, I can email it to you.
I know it.
Okay, I'll do
Thank you.
Leslie Golden?
That's me. With your will, I will sit down and make my presentation, so minimize my handshaking. Dr. Shaw, President Moore, board members, especially the newly elected board members, congratulations. On Memorial Day, I think of my friends and classmates who served and died in Vietnam, and one of them, Dave Westrom in particular, who was a fighter pilot in the Navy. I asked him, why did you do it? The bottom line, why did you do it? He said, to save democracy. You folks are democracy in action. Thank you for serving. Now, my comments are going to be very bizarre, and you're immediately going to shake your hands. This guy's a nut. But the more you think about it, the more you'll see the reasonableness of my suggestion. This concerns the plan of the park board to construct a 4,600 square foot dance studio. The reason given is that there's a waiting list of 26 kids for dance studios, forgetting about the private sector, in field playground adjacent to Mann School. To do this in a plan that was presented as a done deal in October, they're going to level the hill, cut down 100-year-old trees, and destroy the tot lot. Now, why is this relevant to Mann School? Well, this is where the kids go to recess, according to friends on Woodbine. This is where they joyfully play on the weekends and during the summers, and it's a melting pot. You go over there, I live right behind the field playground, or field park, and you'll see the kids from Chicago, you see the kids from Galewood, you see the kids from Oak Park, all playing together. Socialization occurs at a young age. And this park is our neighborhood means of socializing these kids at a young age. We want to sit, now I represent probably 1,000 people from Oak Park, in Northwest Oak Park, the Mann School area. Kyle Tobolek's kids are members, attend Mann School. Erin Connor ran for this board 2 years ago. Her kids were, this is 97, I think, 2 in Mann School, 2 in junior high. They couldn't make it because of work commitments, or they haven't come back for their holidays, or they're too busy. Whatever. So I was selected as a senior without kids now in school to represent. Now, how do I get a number of 1,000 people who are against this project being placed in destroying the hill and the trees and the cloud lot? 300 signatures of 300 were presented to the park board, gathered by John and Joy Michael. They are literally tonight at dinner celebrating their anniversary, or they would have been here. 400 people on a mailing list, coalescing mailing lists of various members of the community. 100 people who showed up at this meeting when the park board presented their done deal. 400 people who signed up to appear at Mann School Auditorium because the park board knew there was going to be a huge turnout in January. That meeting was canceled in the afternoon and turned into a one-way Zoom meeting, which was referred to as one of the members of our group, one of the attorneys in our group, referred to it as a sham mockery. Now, why am I coming to you? Why are 1,000 people represented by me coming to you? We want, in the spirit of intergovernment, and we've gone to the village. We've done everything possible that we could do. Emails, letters, one-on-one meetings, 3 or 4 hours of public comments for months. We've done everything we can. They are firmly set in building their building, let it be built, but we don't want them destroying the field playground. We don't want the hill to be destroyed, or the top lot, or the 100-year-old trees. We don't want the tens of thousands of cicada nymphs getting sustenance from the roots of those trees killed when there's a viable alternative. Now, what's the alternative? And this is the reason we're coming to you. In the spirit of intergovernmental cooperation, which is either formally or informally a relationship that you have with the Park District, we are suggesting, and this concept was brought up by one of the other attorneys, a judge in the group, use the airspace above the Mann School parking lot for their building. Put it on stilts. 1 story high. Access for ADA access would be via ramp and a 1-story elevator. The project is doable. I spoke to the architect of the field playground plan. He said, oh, there are dozens of buildings on stilts throughout the Chicago area. It's architecturally a doable project. Now, if you want to look at the Let's Talk letter that we drafted and I sent to all of you, it provides the pros of such a concept. First of all, the safety issue. This is paramount. Right now, and I expressed this to the administration previous to the board meeting, after school, there's drop-offs of Hepzibah home for their daycare. There's pickups for the Mann School students. Now there would be 30 or 40 or 50, we don't know the details, driving on narrow Berkshire Street, dropping off kids for the dance studios. This is an increasingly traffic hazard. In addition, there used to be a row of bushes from the Forest Avenue alley all the way to Woodbine along Berkshire by that fencing. The police asked, and the village agreed, and the Park District agreed, to cut down all those bushes. Why? To give the undermanned police department a clear view of the park to prevent child abuse, molestation, kidnappings. This building would directly interfere with the police ability to look into that park. But the safety issue, there's another safety issue with dropping off the kids. Woodbine is a one-way street. I mean, it doesn't go through Mann School, as you all know. It's heavy traffic, north and south speeding. The kids getting in and out of the cars are in danger. By putting this in the Mann School parking lot, we avoid that the kids are dropped off on the blacktop. There are many other advantages and disadvantages, both for the District 97, for the Park District, and for the environment. And we ask you to read that Let's Talk. A lot of people put a lot of input into it. And Dr. Shaw, board, if you can begin communicating with the Park District, with Jan Arnold and the board members, I think Adi Onayemi would be very responsive to your calls. Work intergovernmental cooperation and put this building over the parking lot. It would save the wear and tear of the parking lot. It would save the cost of snow shoveling. And the teachers and staff would be very happy. They don't have to scrape off the ice and snow from their after school. It's a crazy idea. But think about it, and it's viable, and it would solve many issues, including the safety issue.
Mr. Golden, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but you reached your time limit for today.
Thank you
We
all.
have your information and we'll review it. Thank
You
you.
have my information. Please look at the Let's Talk. We've got to start talking to Jan Allen and the Park District, tell them we're willing to work with you and use that airspace. Thank you.
Thank you. So moving along to financial analysis.
Yes, so we have Rob Grossi here, our consultant, longtime financial consultant, to give a financial analysis and forecast presentation.
Question.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Good to see you all again. In the state of Illinois and in Washington, D.C., there's a lot of uncertainty around the future funding levels of school districts in Illinois, a lot of uncertainty of the cost of labor for school districts in Illinois. And in order to stay ahead of it, the Board of Education has asked me to put together a financial analysis presentation of where the district stands at this moment in time. Keep in mind, this is a living document. A lot of things are going to change. The fiscal year is not even ended for this year. We still have to spend a detailed amount of time creating the budget for next year. The state budget down in Springfield still hasn't been decided, and there's some reference to a, multi-$100 million hole that has to be addressed, and we don't know how that's gonna impact schools. And of course, we don't know what's gonna happen in Washington DC as it relates to federal grants. So we're gonna go through a presentation and then, answer any questions that you may have. So to start off with, historical financial summary. I had the opportunity to work with a lot of school districts. One of the great policies that the board has is a fund balance target policy. Few districts have a policy where there's a minimum and maximum desired range. And I think it's a great policy, and I think the district, since I've been here, 7 years or so, have really made their decisions within these parameters. So during the times when fund balances got above the 180-day reserve level, the Board of Education looked at things like abating the bond levy, things of that sort. And when it got below, and if you go prior to 2017 and it threatened the 90-day reserve, it went for referendum. So our objective in making all these major decisions is to stay between the lines, and you can see that the district has done a really good job of accomplishing that. In terms of revenues versus expenditures during this time period, since 2017, revenues have grown at an average compound rate of 4.8%, and expenditures have grown at 3.3%. So revenue growth has outpaced expenditure growth by 1.5%, and you can see consequently that the surplus, which is revenues versus expenditures, has increased. So the district has essentially ran a deficit in 2017 before the referendum. Because of the timing of when tax money comes in, 18 and 19 were skewed in terms of timing, but you can see the district has done a good job of maintaining expenditures below revenues. And consequently, during this entire time period, revenues have exceeded expenditures by about $54 million. The other event that affects fund balances is capital investment. And over the past 8 years, the district has invested a little over $101 million in capital to its facilities. The district used $64.4 million in bond proceeds, mostly referendum bonds. There were a few non-referendum bonds issued early in this period, but those have all been retired. So the only outstanding debt is referendum debt. And the district used $36.8 million worth of fund balance reserves towards this capital investment. So essentially, numerically, the way it looks is 54 million, as I mentioned, revenues over expenses, $101 million investment in capital, 64 million in bond proceeds, and as a result, fund balances have increased from 27.2 million to 44.6 million. Current financial landscapes, so this talks more about what's going on statewide in Illinois. And a lot of schools have been talking about concerns in all three major revenue categories: local, state, and federal. In terms of local, the three primary sources of revenues are taxes, corporate personal property taxes, which are separate, and interest earnings. And corporate personal, first of all, because Oak Park is in Cook County, and Cook County is a tax cap district, its real estate tax growth can only increase at the rate of inflation. And if you look between 2022 and 2024, that average was 4.47%. The 10 years prior to that period was 1.75%. And starting next year, when the board adopts its levy, the rate is down to 2.9%. And currently, year over year, inflation is trending 2.3%. So it's very likely that this district's major revenue source is going to grow at less than half of what it has the last 3 years. Corporate personal property taxes, every entity in Illinois was overpaid corporate taxes in 2022 and 23 because of a miscalculation done at the Illinois Department of Revenue. They acknowledged the miscalculation and have adjusted accordingly. You could see that through 2025, it's almost gone all the way back to its 2021 levels. And per my conversations with the Department of Revenue, unofficially, we expect it to drop again double-digit percentages in 26. And then interest rates, with the Federal Reserve decreasing interest rates, although that's slowed down, that's going to impact interest rate earnings. State sources are going to be challenged as they were challenged before COVID. The top graph shows what the state's surplus or deficit was from 2021 to 2020. So during that 20-year period, the state only had one surplus, and that was in 2001. Collectively, the state ran significant deficits, and right before COVID, they owed approximately $6 billion in outstanding bills. And as a result of that, hospitals weren't being paid timely, universities weren't being paid timely, and school districts were not being paid timely. As transportation aid was delayed and general state aid was prorated. Since COVID began, just as school districts received significant relief dollars, the state of Illinois received approximately $8 billion in COVID money, and were able to use that money to pay their bills, to continue to fund education at a growth rate of $350 million a year. And you can see that they ran surpluses in 23 and 24. However, just like school districts are ending this fiscal cliff because this money doesn't come in anymore, it's anticipated, it's known that this is going to happen to the state of Illinois as well. And the governor's office is projecting deficits, annual deficits in the $5 billion range again. And the concern that school districts have right now is how is that going to impact funding to education in Illinois, and how is it going to impact specifically, in this case, Oak Park School District. Because every school district in Illinois has a little different makeup, and there's a lot of speculation on how any reductions in state funding will impact districts like Oak Park versus other districts in the state. This graph, I think, is a very telling graph. Between 2006 and 2017, you can see state funding was basically flat. The foundation level, which is what it used to be called the $6,119 a student, it stayed the same almost that entire time period. Then they changed the formula to evidence-based funding, and they increased it by about $350 million a year. And the state was able to get that money because they received all this additional money from the federal government. So now the state of Illinois has sustained a significantly higher budget with these revenues drying up. So mathematically, a lot of people are very concerned about the future financial condition of the state of Illinois. On the federal side, schools have two different concerns as it relates to the federal government. Number one is direct money from the federal government. This school district, I'll show in a future slide, is not a district that's heavily dependent on federal dollars, but it still does receive $4 million plus a year, which is significant dollars. So that's something that we have to keep our eyes closely on. Your primary sources of revenues from the federal government, title funds and special ed reimbursement funds, as of now are being stated that they will not be impacted adversely. But again, we have to keep a close eye on that. I have a greater concern with how the federal aid is going to, a potential loss of federal aid or freeze of federal aid can already impact a vulnerable state of Illinois. So that's something that could, so in other words, we may not have a direct loss of funds from the federal government, but the state of Illinois could have a direct loss of funds from the federal government that could potentially flow into our school district. So now specific to D97, and again, this is based on where we think the district is. This is a 50% probability at this moment in time. It'll be better or worse. And again, this is a living document that will be revised regularly. As I mentioned before, over 3/4 of the district money comes from real estate taxes. So the rate of inflation drives your revenues. Basically, your district's revenues grow at 3/4 of CPI. Those other pies on the right, pie pieces or whatever, slices, those are at best, they're likely to remain flat. Major assumptions on the revenue side are that the 2024 levy, December 24 levy, the increase was 3.4%. This December, the levy is 2.9% max, and we're projecting 2.4% thereafter. We're projecting that the district's going to continue to recapture the levy from lost appeals, that the district will generate about $400,000 of additional tax revenues from new taxable property in the district. That's based off of historical averages. Interest earnings projected to decrease. Corporate personal property taxes projected to decrease an additional $600,000 next year, as I mentioned. And evidence-based funding. So at evidence-based funding, even though the state has been pumping in $350 million a year to schools, this district only gets $4,500. Not $4,500 per kid, $4,500. So we're projecting that's going to continue, essentially be flat. But again, there's a possibility that could decrease. The district's going to receive its final COVID relief money called ESSER of $531,000 this fiscal year, and other state and federal grant revenues are projected to be flat. So in aggregate, we're projecting revenue growth at 2.2% on average between this fiscal year and the next 5 projection years. On the expenditure side, ironically, salaries and benefits equal the same percentage. 77% of the district's expenditures, excluding capital, are tied to salaries and benefits. Sorry. In terms of the assumptions, salary expenses are projected to increase on average of 3.2% during the projection period, and that's based on current labor agreements, projected raises, savings from retirements, and we're projecting FTE, full-time equivalent staff, to remain flat during the projection period. Employee benefits projected to increase 5% annually, primarily due to anticipated increases of 8% for employee health insurance. District will invest $4 million annually on average for major capital, $400,000 on building maintenance, and $1 million annually on technology upgrades. All those numbers are built into the projections. You will see, starting in FY26, we're anticipating that the district will save $692,000 annually on a transportation service contract that I think is going to be talked about later, spoken about later at in this board meeting, but a rebidding out of one of your portions of your transportation contract. Out of district tuition is projected to increase $50,000 annually, consistent with historical trends, and all the other expenses, which are really not that much, will increase approximately 3% annually. All that combined leads to expenditure growth of 3.5% per year on average. So given the fact that our projected revenue growth is 2.2 and our expenditure growth is higher than that, 3.5, we're projecting that the annual surpluses that the district realizes every year will begin to decrease. Mathematically, that's what will happen if the projections hold true. But the district is still projected at this point in time to run surpluses every year through FY 2030. In terms of fund balance reserves, again, if these assumptions hold true, the district will remain in the middle of their minimum and maximum range, ending with about 33 days, so almost exactly in the middle of its fund balance target. And then again, this is just the mathematics of the graph I just showed you, but basically aggregate surpluses of $30 billion, investing $23.5 million of those surpluses into capital, meaning that fund balances will increase about $6.8 million. But because the budget will be higher in terms of days of reserve, the amount will be lower from that category. And then just want to show two other alternate scenarios. Again, as I mentioned, CPI is the main driver of this district's revenues. So these are three scenarios. One is the 2.4%, which is what I showed you earlier. That's the current projection. 1.4% is what CPI was right before COVID. And 3% is essentially what it was last December. So you could see that under the three scenarios, and keeping everything else the same, your projections in terms of revenues versus expenditures starts to change significantly. And under the scenario that CPI does drop back down to pre-COVID levels, the district would begin deficit spending in FY30. And conversely, if CPI stays at around 3%, the annual surplus stays above $4 million. And then this is just mathematically, again, under these three scenarios, the district still maintains fund balances within their minimum and maximum targets. In terms of federal revenues, as I mentioned earlier, the district receives, excluding the final ESSER payment, the district receives about $4 million a year in federal assistance. The biggest ones in order, 2.2 million is special ed IDA, and the second biggest is National School Lunch, reimbursement for certain lunches. Title I, your district receives very little Title I, and then Medicaid matching, $572,000. There's a lot of uncertainty about which, if any, of these grants are going to be affected. But the important thing and the important task that this board has given the administration is that as new information is known, that we could quickly pivot on the projections and see what it looks like under the different scenarios. Observations and recommendations. Most of this has been already mentioned, but basically the main point is that right now we have a negative gap between expected revenues versus expenditure growth of 1.3%, and that will cause surpluses to begin to decline. In terms of recommendations, continually closely monitor the consumer price index and other events that may impact federal and state revenues. Adjust the financial projections annually and after major changes in the financial landscape, and continue to make financial decisions within the current financial projection model with the goals of 1, maintaining operating fund surpluses, and 2, keeping fund balances within the upper half of its targeted reserve. That is something that certainly FORT, your community group that is an advisory committee to the finances, would ideally like is for the district to keep fund balances in the upper half of that target if possible. So all major decisions, staffing decisions, programming decisions, tax levy decisions, capital projects and capital borrowing decisions to fund the capital projects, all those hit these numbers the same way and should all be made within the guise of long-term financial projections. Any questions?
Yeah. So we're gonna go around, one question, one comment, and then go another round if necessary. Do we wanna start with Becky?
Need some time to process still, but thank you.
Holly?
So I noticed on your recommendations, Rob, usually recommend that we operate revenue in, expenditures out, but we have a 1.3% difference. If you were to really tell us a recommendation, would you recommend that we take care of that 1.3%?
I always, if you could do it without impacting student learning, I would be recommending that you keep expenditure growth and revenue growth the same. If you could do that, you'll never run out of money. Mathematically, if your revenues and expenditures grow the same and you have a natural surplus right now to start, your district will never have to go to referendum, will never have to, again, with the one caveat is, can that be done? Because when revenues are growing at 4.5% like they are historically, you could do that. You could keep within 4.5% and address all the things you want to do with students. If you're in a 1.5% revenue growth scenario, that's gonna be more challenging.
Yeah, and so my comment is just that we had a FORC meeting where we discussed this information. And the two things that they emphasized, was, budgets, but also the fact that we have, our DSEB capacity is at 100%. We haven't taken out any loans for capital projects in a really long time. And that the capital projects, which I know our FAC committee is talking about right now, are likely to exceed the $23.5 million that's budgeted in the next 5 years. So having a conversation and keeping our eye on rates and possibly talking to our folks that helped us with DSEB before, Elizabeth, that team, might be something, because you have to plan for it a little bit, right? It would be something to think about before we kind of jeopardize our fund balances too much, where it impacts learning and DSEB is limited to capital. Like, we can't take out DSEB to pay for instruction.
Right.
So we would want to have that conversation about DSEB for capital sooner before we can't use that money.
That's a great point. To that point, so every school district has a credit card limit essentially on non-referendum bonds that you borrow. And schools regularly borrow non-referendum bonds for capital projects. Your district is one of the few districts that does not have any non-referendum bonds outstanding for capital. So the district, one of the things that would be under the menu of considerations would be within these projections, we have $4 million a year times 5, so $20 million of capital investment using fund balance reserves. Shifting all or a portion of that to the non-referendum bonds, or DSEB as they're called, that would help keep fund balances up closer to those targeted ranges. So I think as information comes out, like if we hear that federal revenues are gonna be cut, that would raise the probability that you'd want to consider that type of avenues. That's certainly one of the levers that we could use to prolong our solid financial condition.
To that end, I'm out of turn, sorry. Go ahead.
John?
Well, my question I had before your presentation, I think, was already answered, though. I was asking about some of the title positions and whether we thought those were, or the positions that are often tied to title money, like Title I interventionists, if those were positions we might potentially have to consider cutting if they're funded by that. But you said, as of right now, it doesn't look like those.
As of right now, the consensus among the school districts is that direct revenue is not going to be cut at this moment in time.
Okay.
So back to the non-capital expenditure funds. So we only have, our revenue grows at a certain rate. But we have older buildings and those buildings are falling, we've been really good about maintaining them and doing it in a fiscally responsible way. But there are some bigger projects coming down the pipe. I guess my question is, if we borrow, we have borrowing power, if we borrow, how are we paying that back when we don't have a revenue source that we can control for this additional expenditure?
So when school districts borrow, it's different than when a person borrows. So when a school district borrows, let's say they go to the bank next door and say, we want to borrow $4 million. So they give you $4 million and you use it for capital investment. But instead of the district paying back the bank, there'll be an additional tax levy that's extended. That's the debt service extension base, the tax levy that will be extended, and essentially the taxpayers will pay back the bank, so the district gets to keep the funds for capital investment.
When the bank loan is paid off, so we'd have to vote on a levy every year in order to cover this?
No, when you, at the time you issue the bonds,
Yeah.
so like traditionally, when a school district borrows for capital projects, they have a payoff, like a mortgage of 10 to 20 years. So at the time that you issue the debt, there'll be a tax levy schedule attached. $2 million a year, $3 million a year, whatever. You can structure it however you want to. But that one time, you will approve the levy schedule which the bondholders, the people that lend the money would demand, because they want to make sure
They get
that
the
there's a
money
tax levy in place to cover the debt. So at the time you do the bond issuance, that levy schedule's approved, filed with the county, and then it just happens automatically. It's not part of the annual levy process in December.
So once that loan is paid off, then the homeowners through property taxes, you'll see that remove or be gone from your
Right.
tax bill.
And that's what happened through I think 2 years ago, Holly, maybe, the district for the
Yes.
first time became debt-free
Yes,
in terms of non-referendum bond.
okay.
It was a little more than that, actually. I think
Maybe
it's
3,
been
4,
like 4 years.
it goes fast. I'm old.
That was my question, thanks.
So first, I wanted to say, again, thank you, because I think one of the points that you made, that we need to be flexible and ready to act, because a lot of this is fuzzy at the moment. We're
Yes.
still waiting to see what happens. To Holly's question earlier, where, if we can keep them equal, let's do that, but if right now that's not the case, where I am seeing, based on your information, where we really need to start acting more strongly is if we start falling below that 2.4% CPI. Am I reading this? Because if we're wanting to keep a healthy fund balance in there to be prepared for emergencies, for pieces, for things happening, am I reading that correctly, that that's where we really need to start? I mean, starting now is always good, but that's where,
Yeah.
if that starts dropping below that point, that's where we really need to start making sure we are being
Yeah.
on top of everything.
Yeah, I would say that if CPI begins to fall to around 2% or sub 2%, that's gonna be something that will likely
That's
force you to make
That's
tough
urgent, that's where I'm
decisions.
going with that,
That's
yeah.
urgent.
Yeah,
That's one thing. And then if in fact, again, right before, we have to remember, right before COVID, when the state was in bad shape, they actually called me and said, what would it look like to cut funding to education by 30%? And it was like $1,100 a kid or something like that. And then they borrowed the money from the federal government for 1 year, and then then COVID hit, which was terrible, but financially it was good for the state. Before that, all the conversation was around pension shifts and around consolidations, and it was, the tough conversations down in Springfield. I fully expect those conversations to start again. I'm not projecting at this point in time that it's going to happen, but that's why us keeping a close eye on this and stay ahead of it. And your district does a great job of doing that, by the way. We probably do these updates at least twice a year, so to make sure that we stay within those targets. But those are the two things that we would say, wow, we got to do something.
so act now, but act urgently in
Right.
that space.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
So I have a question that kind of touches on some of what you and Holly were discussing. So we're in the middle of a master facilities planning process, as you know. And one of the things that we are embedding more significantly in it than we have in the past, I think, is sustainability issues. And one of the dynamics with a lot of investments we might make in terms of sustainability is that in the long run, they're beneficial financially to the district, but in the short run, they may not be. So increasing building efficiency through capital projects, switching from gas to electricity. We have a roof project that's coming up where we are faced with that particular decision. Do we sort of buy a new gas roof unit that's going to cost less, but over the long run may cost us more to operate, and as gas prices go up, et cetera, versus using this as an opportunity to electrify. And I'm curious for your thoughts on how we sort of responsibly approach those kinds of questions in this context. How do we make sure that we're both, in the short term, not being reckless, but also not sacrificing long-term benefits for short-term gains?
So within these categories you talk about, there's benefits potentially that are outside of financial. So
Yes.
I'll just talk about the financial.
Yes.
So from the financial perspective, I think absolutely, we should do an analysis with everyone to get an idea. Generally speaking, there's not a complete offset. But again, under the scenario that we're borrowing money for the project. Let's just use that scenario, where the district gets the money, but they don't have to use their fund balance reserve to pay off the bank because it's coming from a separate tax levy. So if that work projects savings in the budget, you know, if we save, I'm making up a number, $100,000 a year on utility costs, for example, that helps the bottom line.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't close the gap completely, but, you know, the mindset of saying every dollar counts is a good mindset to have going into something like this.
Becky, did you want to?
Yeah, I have my questions. Thank you for giving me a moment. Feel free to say, not fair question, can't compare. But if you were to compare districts like ours in terms of our financial prospects and how we budget things here and where we get our money to fund schools, how often do they have to look at personnel issues as a way of adjusting in these kind of scenarios where federal funding might be cut?
Okay, so I hear I'll give you two comparisons for this district. First of all, in terms of your district's current financial condition, and your financial condition since I started here, your biggest vulnerability is that your fund balance reserves relative to your peers is low. And that makes you vulnerable to unforeseen events. Other districts I may work with may have 10 months, 11 months worth of reserves. They can withstand short-term shocks. So your district is, even though you're running surplus, you know, the two current metrics I look at are fund balance reserves and structural surpluses or deficit. You've done a great job historically spending within your means, which is what you can control. But fund balance reserves never have been very high in the school district relative to your peers, so you're vulnerable. In terms of your funding exposure, I think that, so the state of Illinois has four categories of funding. They put schools in four categories within the school funding formula. Tier 1, 2, 3, 4. Tier 1 are the districts that are the poorest in terms of property value per student and have the highest percentage of low-income students. Your district and a lot of the districts in this area are more in the Tier 3 and Tier 4 district. So you don't get a lot of money from the state as evidence that you only get $4,500. Right now, the way the current formula reads is that if there's this is actually a really good question. If there's an EAV, if they freeze evidence-based funding, selfishly, your district really doesn't care because you lose $4,500, where some of the schools I work with in South Cook County might lose $2 or $3 million of expected growth. So a freeze doesn't matter much to you. I would be more concerned about what happens if they cut funding. Right now, the way that they cut funding is the tier 3 and tier 4s, which you're in, will lose money before they cut money from the other districts. But not significantly more. But I could see a push from the really poor districts to say, if you got to cut significantly, cut more from the 3s and 4s. So you're vulnerable just because of how you fall in the state funding formula. And then in terms of federal funding, only $4 million comes from federal funding, which is about 4% of your budget. So some loss in federal dollars won't impact you as much as other districts, again, like South Cook County. But if the federal issues flow through the state and then the state flows through you, and they're looking, before COVID, the issues that they were talking about in terms of pension shifts and things of that sort were kind of designed to hurt your districts before they hurt the high low-income districts. So you are the highest in the group of highest vulnerability for something major happening at the state and federal government level.
Can I add to that just real quick? I think what you're asking though, so 77% of our budget is salaries and benefits. If we have to make a major cut, yes, it will affect personnel.
Yes.
That's the question.
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay, right? Is that the question?
Yeah, and
That's
I think I
helpful,
was
I'm just saying, yeah.
also wondering, if you've seen other districts take a different approach, obviously we want to, a lot of the personnel live in the community.
Right.
So we're talking about people that are paying taxes and also working for us. So it's just something that we have a unique
Yeah, I mean,
scenario.
the positive is that the students are being exposed to a lot of services, which is labor. And, but the bad news is if you have to make a reduction of significance, you know, you would have to look to the, FTEs in the school district.
I have one question. Well, I didn't see school fees on here in terms of the revenue.
So, yeah, so this was just major, just a major high level,
Major, okay.
the biggest dollar parts of the assumptions.
So it's such a small percentage.
It's a very small percentage.
Okay.
But again, every dollar counts, but it's a small percentage.
That makes sense. And then I guess kind of like a follow-up to that. I see that in terms of the revenue, there's 50,000 from out-of-district tuition. Does that account for, we've been talking a lot about like lower district birth rates and classroom sizes potentially being smaller because of that. Was that factored into that, the 50,000 that we typically get every year from out-of-district tuition?
What organization?
No,
We're
that's
paying-
special ed. That's what we.
Okay, okay, all right. Oh, so that's what we're spending.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the 50, that's growth in out-of-district tuition primarily, students receiving special education services outside of the school district.
Okay, I'm sorry,
Sorry.
I was mixing up those two slides, working on my computer. Sorry about that, thank you.
No.
Anybody have a second question?
I have one more question and comment.
Go ahead.
If we haven't had debt in a while, what is the 4% debt payments that are on the expense?
The referendum bonds.
Oh, we're still paying? That's 4%? Okay. And then my other comment is that I understand Nancy's question to get to urgent, but for all the financial planning we've done for 5 year, like every 5-year projection going back many years has accounted for 3%. So just so that everyone realizes, this 2.4 is very unexpected. We did not plan for it in the levies in prior years, in prior budgets, in our contract negotiations, in all the different projections we've had. This is a new projection. It is a decrease in revenue that we have not had for years. As I know that because I think we're actually at 2.4. I would call it urgent at 2.4. I think that's really low relative to what we've been managing to for the last however many years. So it's a subjective opinion, but I think that the decrease by that much based on some decisions we've made over the last couple of years puts us in a different position.
And I do have one more question. There's no one between me and Holly who.
I'll say, are there anybody have a second question, comment? Venus? No? Okay.
So this is just to follow up on Holly's a charge to the district to start looking now at, the transportation piece that we are voting on later today is a very good example of how being conscientious about contracts can actually start saving money now without impacting student services. So as we were looking at contracts, I believe last go around, Board Member Moore brought up looking at, or maybe it was Venus, I'm so sorry, looking at multi-year contracts. So to do savings in those spaces, and I know those are small, but as we are moving forward, the more we can kind of compile those, the small bits of big pieces, it will help the district later on.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Rob.
you.
Just a reminder, if you do think of questions, please email them. Moving on to 8.1.
Yes, for the amended budget, you have Yasmin and I think Rob. I don't know where you were
Good
going,
evening,
Rob.
everybody.
Yasmin Dada coming up for this portion of the agenda.
I can try. Want me to start? Good evening, everybody. Thanks for inviting me again. When school districts approve the budget, which is in September, one of the calculations is that they compare the budgeted figures to the prior year expenditure figures for certain functions of the school district, certain categories of expenditures. When the budget was adopted in 2020, in September of '24, those figures were below 5%. But what happens to a lot of school districts, several school districts, is that the auditors come in and they make final adjustments to the preliminary end-of-year numbers in November or December or January, once the budget's already adopted. So what happened in this district is they made adjusting journal entries to the FY '24 budget audit, which shifted stuff out of these functions. So as a result, we were over by about $80,000. What school districts do and what we're recommending tonight is we amended the budget and we barely shifted $80,000 of expenses from one of those functions that's part of the calculation into a function that's not a part of the calculation. There's a lot of expenses within the budget that has discretion on where to charge. We did not change the aggregate budget. We aren't recommending any additional expenditure decisions. This is just a mechanical adjustment to be in compliance with the State Board of Education.
Any other questions? All right,
Feels like a shell game.
It is.
I love that. Thanks for saying it, because I was thinking of it.
It is.
So I noticed should there be an amount in the motion?
You just approved the amended budget reflects the 80,000 switch. So I think you could just approve the amended budget as presented.
Right. I don't think you need to state the amount, just that it's an amended budget.
Can I get someone to read the motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve the amended budget materials for FY '25 as presented.
Second,
Broster,
yes.
Perez,
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
Spurlock,
Yes.
Kim,
Yes.
Kurt Johnson,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
motion passed.
Thank you.
You sure? Wait, I have a point of clarification. If we didn't put the amount that we amended the budget for in the motion, when someone looks back years from now, how are they gonna know what we amended it to?
So we didn't amend the amount, we just moved it, there's no change in value. So it's just
Right.
ahead of how it's accounted. So I don't think, because I'm usually a stickler about amount, but if we were to put 80,000, someone would think we changed it by 80,000.
So
which
we're
we didn't.
changing the category. I know we're changing the
Yeah.
categories, but
It's not a change, yeah,
amended seems like it is amended, but
Right.
it sends you in a different direction than what actually happened.
It's a unique exercise for sure. But again, it's something a lot of schools do.
Right, it's amended by line item.
Yeah.
Thank you, sorry.
Thank you.
Superintendent Overview.
Okay, great to have our superintendent, Dr. Usmashaw. So got this deck here, we just got a few slides and excited to just give a quick overview on some important information. So first, these are our 4 transformation goals, and the 2 with the yellow borders are the ones that we'll be talking about tonight. So first, with that goal 1, let me go back. We learn, lead, and celebrate together. We have 2 goals, sub-goals underneath that, focused on our district culture and on all employee professional learning. For goal 2, we design for all. That's where we focus on elementary core instruction and middle school redesign. So for goal 1, just want to make sure that we're elevating and celebrating our different heritage and identity celebrations. This month we honor both Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Heritage Month and Jewish American Heritage Month. As we plan for next year, we're looking to create an annual celebration calendar that's shared with our schools and really creating systems so that we get deeper and deeper every year with how we are holding up and celebrating the diversity of identities in our district. And then in staff recognition, it has been a lot of fun to celebrate staff appreciation in early May, and we will be having a retirement reception and, thanking our retirees that are leaving the system. So that's on our radar. We also this month had a lot of partnership, transition, and celebrating of music education. Really, the arts have been really forward. We've celebrating that blast off to kindergarten. Again, our real great showing with our PTOs and our administrators from the schools, from district office. Really a beautiful, wonderful outdoor event. Nancy was there. Nancy, I don't know where you were when we took this picture. I missed you, but you were there. So Gavin and Nancy were also there. And Gavin's dog named?
Finnick.
What's that?
Finnick.
Finnick was also there. So we also had a wonderful event at Irving where Nick and Kara Sakaliris were named Educators of the Year by OPEF. Again, a great partnership with OPEF, especially as we gear up for the portrait of an Oak Park 8th grade graduate. So that was wonderful. I was standing in the back of the auditorium while Kara and Nick were coming in to be surprised. So I had a chance to see just how excited the kids were when they jumped up and threw their hands in the air with excitement about Nick and Kara's recognition. So that was a great event. And then also for the 6th consecutive year, this focus on D97 as a great music education community, the arts, music, really beautiful community coming together around all of these areas. So it's been an awesome May highlights. So moving now to goal 2, we designed for all. Tonight's presentation is focused on middle school social science, and we have a resource recommendation coming forward. And our core instruction team has really done a great job. I want to acknowledge, you're going to hear from them in a few minutes, expediting this area of work this year when we knew we needed to make sure that we have clear guidance and input on what is it and how are we teaching the standards for social science in our middle school. And so even as we do the master schedule work, it's what are we teaching, because all of this is about student experience and instruction. So really excited for you to have this presentation, and everything goes back to our equity policy and to what we're trying to do as outlined here in terms of equitable access, eliminating disproportionality, how are we learning this new curriculum, and how are we making sure that in everything we do, we're sending that message to our students and our staff about who we are here in Oak Park. One of the things you're going to see over the next year is the framework for teaching as a connector across the different things we're bringing forward. In tonight's presentation, Dr. De Leon will show a slide that talks about the different components of instruction. And overarching all of this is how we think about what effective teaching looks like. The Danielson framework for teaching is essentially the standards of effective teaching, and this is an anchor that we'll use to look at how are we planning and preparing. How are those learning environments, elevating all of our students, and how are we making sure we're also reflective in our teaching, and that we're asking those higher order questions and really engaging our students. So you'll be hearing more about that. In terms of the social studies units of instruction, what we know is that we had more outdated materials, and we had things left over from when we were an IB district. That was what hit the accelerator on our need to make sure we come up and do something so that we have curriculum and resources that present our students with the most current information in this very important area of their development and how they see the world around them. So you'll see those bigger ideas in tonight's presentation. We're really excited. I think we have a lot of people here that have been part of that work. And then, always again, if there are any questions or concerns from our community, we have the Let's Talk, and we'll use that to answer and get back to people. So at this time, we're ready to move to the next agenda item.
This agenda item is the district transformation goal updates.
Yep.
We have the whole gang.
We do. And if we need more chairs, we'll get those.
I can stay.
coming up.
Okay, I think we might have 2 chairs for every person at this point.
Oh, wow. Cheers.
Everyone brought a chair.
Go ahead. Actually, wait, why don't you all come over here? Let's have the teachers and the students come on over.
I could still I don't need to squeeze through there.
All right, so thank you all for the opportunity to share with you our social science resource recommendation for adoption. We're excited to have the opportunity to share with you the great work from a lot of people that are coming together and really showcasing this for you tonight. As Dr. Shah was mentioning, a lot of the work that is happening right now in the middle school, as we have put together like a structure of a schedule, now it's really the work goes into really designing and really maximizing that time and the use of those blocks. And this is where a lot of this work also is going to make an impact in the area of social science. So as you can see, there's a lot of, you have seen this slide before, a lot of factors, the key elements that go into really drafting that student experiences for the students. And in this particular occasion, we're going to be concentrating in the curriculum and instruction area. So we have a lot of people here, so why don't we introduce ourselves? Let's start.
Anna Collin, Senior Director of Data Analytics and Research.
April Computer, Principal of Brooks Middle School. All of a sudden, I'm like, oh, hi.
Luis Alejandro, Superintendent of Middle Schools.
Hi, I'm Gabe Gallinari. I'm a 7th grader at Brooks.
I'm Anna Kinnaman. I'm a 7th grade teacher at Brooks.
Holden Syndergaard, 6th grade teacher at Brooks.
Jared Saltis, 7th grade teacher at Julian.
Ellie Wright, 7th grade student at Julian.
Hello, Tawanda Lawrence, Senior Director of Teaching and Learning.
Hi everyone, Veena Rajashekar, Middle School Curriculum Coordinator.
All right. So this is the buckets of the presentation about how we're going to be sharing the information with you. We're going to start with our why, then move into the process, making the recommendation for adoption, and then also share with you the budget and next steps. So we always like to start with a quote, as Dr. Lawrence always reminds us. So I had the opportunity for you to read that. All right. So starting with our why, Dr. Lawrence.
Sure. Our why is grounded in the Illinois learning standards as well as the Illinois instructional mandates. So our Illinois learning standards identify what students need to know and be able to do by the end of the school year. And the instructional mandates are specific areas of study that are identified by the state. And it's the law that requires all public schools to include specific topics in their curriculum. So this image is just representing the content of social science and how it's organized. So you'll see that there are disciplinary standards, inquiry standards, as well as the Illinois instructional mandates. And so the disciplinary standards really build on those foundational skills in terms of civics, economics, financial literacy, geography, and history. And then the inquiry standards allow students to sort of recognize various perspectives. It also allows them to ask essential questions and identify sources as they're conducting that inquiry, as well as taking informed action. So the inquiry standards and the disciplinary standards should be coexisting together in classrooms. And so in addition to that, there are the Illinois instructional mandates at the bottom. And this is really where we're looking at a well-rounded, inclusive curriculum where students are looking at specific topics that will help them become informed, engaged citizens. Topics usually reflect different perspectives of historically marginalized communities. For instance, Black history is taught through the Illinois instructional mandates, as well as Asian American history, Native American history, and the roles and contributions of LGBTQ+. Next slide. So earlier this year in January, the core instruction department met with the social science department, and we wanted to kind of talk about where we've been, where we are now, and where we're going. And so when we had this conversation with the social science department, we started with a journey in terms of where we've been as it relates to the professional learning that's been provided over the years to the department, as well as our implementation of our international baccalaureate units and assessments. And then we shifted into where we are now as the shifts have happened with the revised social science standards as well as the Illinois instructional mandates being revised too. And then we talked about where we're going as a department. And this is where we highlighted the 3 initiatives that we would engage in with the department between January and the end of this school year. The first initiative was to pilot 2 comprehensive social science resources during trimester 3. The second initiative was to continue to enhance a few of the 7th grade units of study that we had started working through. I'd like to acknowledge Anna Kinnaman here, who did a great deal of that work for that team. And the third initiative, where we wanted to continue focusing on our instructional practices and professional learning and engaging with work with Dr. Asif Wilson, who's an assistant professor of curriculum instruction at the University of Illinois Chicago.
Okay, so we just want to take a brief look at our social science curricular resource and pilot process. This most likely looks very familiar to you, as my elementary counterpart, Jen Logan, has shared the details of the process that we used with K-5 ELA and math. And so although, as Dr. Shaw mentioned, this was an expedited process for middle school social science, we still adhere to this framework. So just to quickly recap, we began the process in school year 22, there was a brief pause, and then we picked it back up this year. And we felt that it was important to strengthen and support our middle school social science teaching and learning. So we established a pilot timeline, we engaged in professional learning, we provided a form for feedback from all stakeholders, and we gathered student assessment data. And then last week at our social science department meeting, we all came together to analyze data and engage in a consensus building protocol to select a comprehensive resource. So now we'll just shift to our recommendation for district-wide adoption. Could I get a teacher to read the mission statement for social science?
I can do it.
Thank you.
The D97 Social Science Department is committed to helping students become independent and reflective thinkers. Students will make connections from history to the present through reading, writing, and the inquiry process. As educators, we will guide students in the understanding and analysis of important issues of the past and foster a commitment to global citizenship, equity, and anti-racism.
Thank you, Ms. Kinnaman. So as we mentioned, we also transitioned this year from being individuals and societies department to social science, as we were no longer part of the IB MYP program. And so we began this journey by reflecting on what teachers wanted for student learning. And this was led by our social science curriculum coordinator, Casey Wybe. And so this slide, if you take a look at the bubbles, highlights the predominant hopes and dreams that came out of this collaborative activity that the teachers engaged in. So I will just give you a moment to take a look, and we are also showing all our teachers this year who participated in everything that we did with our social science department this year. So getting back to our recommendation for adoption, the teachers piloted 2 resources this trimester. They first did HMH social studies from March 4th to April 11th, and then they transitioned to Discovery Education's social studies textbook from April 14th to May 16th. So as we look at the next few slides presented by Dr. Lawrence and Dr. Colliner, they'll share more information about the feedback that we received and the data that we looked at to inform our decision for the resource that we're recommending.
So this slide, I'm sure, looks familiar to most of you. It's pretty much the same process that we engaged in with ELA this year. Although it was a shortened pilot, we wanted to make sure that we gathered meaningful feedback from all And so the data sources, we gathered feedback from various school districts who also utilize HMH Social Studies and Discovery Education Social Studies textbook. In addition to that, we wanted to gather feedback from our D97 staff, so we talked to teachers, administrators, as well as students and families. And in addition to that, we also wanted to see how students performed within the units of instruction we piloted. So we administered a pre and post assessment at the beginning and end of each of the programs. The evaluation tools are listed here. We gathered components from each of those tools to create one evaluation tool. And the 7 criteria that you see on the right is how our teachers evaluated each of the areas or each of the programs that were piloted.
So there's a lot of data slides available to you in the appendix, and there were a lot of data slides that we went over with the teachers and talked through together. So this table, just like we did with the ELA pilot, or very similarly, just sort of summarizes some of the what we felt were the key numerical values to look at in thinking about making a decision for one of the 2 pilots. But the headline here is that among all the interest groups here, the teachers, families, and students, when they had an opinion, there was a trend toward preferring Discovery over HMH in all 3 interest groups. One learning that we had in reviewing the data is that families expressed, and you'll see it there reflected in the high percentage of those with no preference, felt like they didn't have enough time or sufficient time or as much ideal time to really engage with the curriculum and weren't as aware as we may have hoped. Again, that could be because of the expedited process, but that was one finding and learning that we had. But you see there among the teachers and students, among the ratings and the rankings from teachers, that there's a clear preference for Discovery Education over HMH.
Do we have raw numbers on, and I say that because I got a survey for the curriculum, and I was like, I don't know anything about it, except my daughter complained about some things. And so I didn't respond, so I'm just curious, like, how many people actually responded from the families?
Off the top of my head, I don't remember, but it is in the appendix somewhere. Apologies, I don't have my survey in front of me.
I didn't see any raw numbers.
Yeah, that's right, because it went up to 80 something.
Okay.
85, I think, was the final, 84, 85, sounds right.
81.
Thank you. Wishful thinking on my part. Additional 4.
So after piloting the 2 resources, the resource that we identified to recommend to the board for adoption is standards aligned. It also includes multiple perspectives, civic engagement, as well as inquiry-based, project-based, and it builds background knowledge. And if you click one more time, Louise, it's the grand reveal, Discovery Education Social Studies textbook.
Okay, so just to give you a little bit more information about what Discovery Education Social Science Textbook is all about, there's a lot of information on this slide, but I just want to highlight a few things for you. So this program really offers, as Dr. Lawrence mentioned, a standards-aligned, project-based, hands-on learning experience for our students to be able to build and widen their knowledge and understanding of concepts through an instructional model of learning that focuses on the 5 E's, where students get to engage, they get to explore, explain, extend, and evaluate. And it's also important to note that there are a variety of differentiation tools integrated throughout this resource. So it also makes learning more accessible for all of our students and an opportunity for our teachers to facilitate that, building their background knowledge by really designing it and tailoring it to what students need. So a few examples of the different types of differentiation tools that are offered in this program are that core content is offered in 2 different Lexile levels. There's authentic Spanish translation. There are strategies for teaching students with special needs and English language learners. There's also a chance to be able to translate the content into 180 different languages when we need it or if we need it, and as well as offering a lot of higher level thinking tasks to really challenge everyone. So it gives us an opportunity to meet students really where they are and take them from there. So we would love to now, our wonderful teachers are here, and I want to thank them for being here tonight. And then we'll hear from the students. And so, and we would just love to hear from all of you. In what ways has the implementation of Discovery Education Textbook influenced your social science instruction and student learning outcomes? So if you just want to share some of your experiences and insights from the time that you spent teaching it.
So I can start.
Thank you.
So I really enjoyed the Discovery Education Textbook. I felt that my students were very engaged, especially with the differentiation tools. Students never want to feel different, and the tools are used in a very subtle way where they can change the route for however they need to fit their needs. So the students were much more engaged because they didn't have to go to something different, it didn't look different, is that they were able to be on what seemed like the same page as their peers, but it was something that was meeting their needs. Similarly, their outcomes were much better. They were able to engage in the material because outside, many students were able to access additional resources like there's reading, there's news, there's things that they have full access to no matter what, whether I assign it, they can go and find it. Very different from HMH where it has to be assigned. The students came to me every day and were like, hey, I found this, or I was able to use this, and they were able to be much more engaged in their learning compared to the other pilots.
Thank you.
I'll go next. Yeah, from my perspective, I would, second a lot of the things Jared said, but I would also say it had a much bigger variety of activities available. So in terms of like informing my instruction, like I was able to vary things a lot more with Discovery versus HMH, and it was a great resource to be able to do different things. If we needed to get important information where we read and answer questions, we could do that. But it also had like other interesting activities, like they could make a movie trailer about the expansion of Rome or a comic strip about Greece. Like there was just all kinds of stuff in there that made it a little bit more varied and a little bit more interesting for students. And then I think that helped lead to better outcomes for my students because they were a little bit more engaged by the variety of instruction available and variety of activities available.
Yeah, I mean, I think from like the lesson planning perspective, it definitely streamlined things. In the past, we were starting from scratch, so when we'd sit and start a unit, we'd, think like, okay, what stories do we want to tell, whose voices do we want to incorporate, and then we had to go find it. And, sometimes we'd find it and it would be at a reading level that was far beyond a 7th grade level or far below, so like there was a lot of searching for things that may or may not exist. And now this was just there. So since I didn't have to spend all that time searching and then translating, I could actually use that time to like be creative and come up with fun activities and ideas and not just trying to like build the base. I got to move beyond just building the base.
Thank you, Mr. Saltis, Syndergaard, and Ms. Kinnaman. We appreciate it. So we would love to hear from our students. So we have 2 7th grade students here. One from Gabe is from Brooks and Ellie is from Julian. And so just whatever part of this question, it is a multi-layered question, but we were just wondering, Gabe and Ellie, how has this resource, the Discovery Education Textbook, help you better understand social science, stay interested in what you're learning, and just think about how it connects to the world and your role in it. So if you want any part of it or all part of it, we would love to hear from you.
I guess I'll go first. It really, it put me in the shoes of a lot of these people, specifically like soldiers during the Battle of Gettysburg and African Americans, because we were focused on the Civil War a lot back then. It really helped me, understand what these people lived through back then. It was very useful. There were also something that I found very helpful was there were built-in hyperlinks, I believe, that you could click on a name of a person that appears in the text, and it gave you a page that sort of told you a little bit about said person, which was pretty helpful. Overall, yeah, no, I just thought it was I liked it more than H&H. It was just a more interesting program in my opinion. It taught me a lot about what it was like to be one of these people, how they lived, and it was very interesting.
Thank you, Gabe.
Discovery helped me stay interested in social studies or social science by allowing me and my classmates to engage with guided readings, images, and videos. Course is really interactive, really entertaining, and it's really easy to use, especially compared to HMH. It offers really in-depth explanations, but also there's an option if you need to, you can have like general summary of information. And I think it's better than HMH because HMH was a little boring compared to it. So, and finally, I think teachers will find it much easier to plan with this curriculum and help students stay more engaged with like the topics that we're learning.
Thank you, Ellie, thank you, Gabe, thank you for being here and sharing your insights. And as they both mentioned, it is very interactive and talking about they get to pursue and their curiosities and inquire and learn with different modalities as well. And the program also offers a lot of primary sources. So as Gabe and Ellie were mentioning, they're able to click on things and even to be able to understand more of what it feels like in a first-person perspective as well. So thank you all for being here, and I will pass the baton to Dr. De Leon
All right.
for the next slide.
All right, so now we get to the big question. So what is the budget and our next steps? So the Illinois School of Education Social Studies textbook bundle is a six-year subscription. So it's $42,840 for each of the schools for a total of $85,680. There's $6,600 for professional development included. So the total of these resources is $92,280 for 6 years.
Can I clarify that while you're there? Is that each year that same amount, or is that amount for 6 years?
It's total for 6 years.
Why is it so much? My parents would say, be suspicious, it's so much cheaper than the other curriculum.
That's why I was like, just
Well,
clarify
also all
that.
digital.
Yeah, it's not as many students. Okay, so now we're looking at the next steps in our timeline. So part of our work, if this is approved, is that we would design an adoption plan, and within that plan, we will make sure that we purchased all of our teacher and student resources, and then we'll design a professional learning plan for the year. And this plan will not just be to introduce teachers to the resource, but also to enhance instructional practice as well. So we'll be looking at that. So it would be year one of implementation, May through July, and then when we move from May into August, that is when we will be working on the scope and sequence, because we want to make sure that all of our standards are covered, as well as the Illinois instructional mandates. So we will design that scope and sequence for all grades, and then we will provide that initial professional learning for Brooks and Julian beginning on Institute Day.
So then moving along, we have October and June. Well, we'll continue our professional development, as they were mentioning tonight. We have the what, and then it goes into the how to do things. So that's where a lot of the magic and collaboration will be happening throughout. But then also the opportunity to really take time with our families as well to learn about the adoptive resource. And then from April and June, as we are going through this phase and learning, we also want to basically start thinking about designing the ongoing professional learning for the two subsequent years, and continue modifying and adapting what we're learning to the students' experiences. The most important part as well is to measure the impact that this has and the success that this resource has along the way. And then with that, I want to thank you for your time and want to open for questions.
John, want to start?
Yeah, so one of the concerns I had, and this actually came up in one of the comments, was that the initial selection of the two curriculums to pilot was done 3 years ago when you were still under the IB, and there was actually a comment about some of the people who were part of that selection process aren't even in the district anymore. And so I'm kind of curious how you bridged that divide in terms of who was involved in the original selection process. And there may be curriculum that has come out since then that might be a better fit other than these two. So I'm kind of wondering how you addressed that.
And that certainly was a bit of a challenge, considering we started this process in school year 22 and then we paused and picked it up this school year. We did address that. We talked with our building principals. We also talked with our department chairs. And there were some options to sort of go back and revisit the resource review process. However, this was a bit of an urgency in terms of really taking a look at the core units that we were teaching at the time that hadn't been fully vetted. And so wanting to make that shift, we did come to a decision that we would continue with the resources that we had identified as a team and pilot those 2 resources to see if one would be a good fit. The individuals who were on I believe it was the pilot resource, the INS pilot resource team, several teachers are still here and some have moved on, but the majority of those teachers are still here.
So I know you talked about the depth of the resources and you mentioned the flags as some of the topics. Are you able to see the activity of each student in terms of what they're looking at in addition to what you've assigned?
Yes. So the way that they call them model lessons, kind of like the way that the model lesson outlines it is when you get to, I believe it's like the elaborate portion of the lesson, it suggests the teacher selects an activity for the class to do that you don't like let them all pick one of 5. So there's a little bit more direction from the teacher in that regard, that like they're picking how the kids are going to elaborate on what they've learned. But as far as like if you assign them an assignment, I can then go in and kind of see how they've progressed through what it was that was assigned.
Through the assignment, but not, do you have any gauge of their own exploration on a particular topic?
Like, can I see their screen type thing?
Or just what they've clicked on or what they're interested in within the program?
If it is available, I haven't come across that.
I haven't come across that, no.
Me either.
Yeah, no.
But I don't wanna say no for certainty, yeah.
The reason I ask is because, you wanna know why I asked? Just because it sounds like this could spark the interest of students who may not have necessarily been as interested in social studies. But if you can then drill down and figure out what was the impetus for the spark or interest, that could springboard into other things. That was really just a curious question.
So you're done now. I again wanted to thank everyone here, as I have with previous pilots, for everyone working together. Seeing teachers, admin, students, that's how you end up with a robust and good set of materials for use in the classroom. I want to highlight something that Jung brought up earlier. I know this was a quick process this time, but with families on that, and especially with something where I suspect you get asked less from parents than something like math for help and for guidance. Setting this up is also a way for helping parents to understand the importance of social studies and what is being covered and engage, as well as getting feedback. So when moving forward with this next year, I would take that opportunity, because it is a new resource, to share with parents and get their buy-in, because social studies rocks. So, let's make sure that we're getting everyone involved. And I would also say then carry that forward with other pilots, is making sure that the family engagement is equal on all of those, because it is also a way to engage with parents.
And I thanks, Nancy, and I think also to your question, Venus, and the team, this idea of the framework for teaching being an overarching theme as we plan for next year, thinking about student intellectual engagement. What does that look like in those 4 domains, and how do we see that happening across our district, whether it's in literacy or in social studies or in math. How are we thinking about the framework for teaching and student intellectual engagement as something that we can actually describe using the framework for teaching? That's going to be something we're talking about and thinking about, that then those things transfer as a parent to know this is what it means for my child to be engaged. And I think that gets to your question, Venus, like how are we paying attention? And that is part of the framework for teaching. How are we paying attention to what students are interested in? So we think, oh wow, looks like Gabe is really interested in that. And we're teaching the standards and we're teaching inquiry-based learning. So then there's 100 ways to do that. And so we don't want to become, we're not teaching a book or a curriculum. This is a resource to help us teach the standards and to have students have this kind of experience of really understanding. So I think what happens is once we have these resources that are thoughtful, then our teachers, and I think Ms. Kinnaman started to describe this, you can level up to actually instructional design as opposed to running around trying to find the resources that you need. And so that's what we want to support our teachers to do so that we can get to kind of higher levels of core instruction.
Are you done?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you all for the presentation. It's always great to have like multiple perspectives represented. Always great to have students, and Gabe and Ellie, you seem very undaunted by talking to us, so that's
Well, appearances can be deceiving.
well, you know, sometimes they say fake it till you make it, so good job. One of the things that resonated with me in the presentation was the idea of inquiry standards, which seems particularly important today as there's so many different sources of information and perspectives that are coming at people, and at a broader societal level, perhaps we don't have the right kind of tools for sort of understanding and critiquing that information. And two of the kind of areas where that seems particularly important are around the crises of democracy that we're dealing with right now and issues of climate. And I'm wondering to what extent this curriculum gets into those things or provides opportunities to get into those things in a sort of robust way, if you know.
We only piloted
One unit.
One unit, yes. But, you know, playing around, looking around, 7th grade, we do the Constitution, we talk about democracy and all of that, and I could see that the stuff that is there is far more aligned with allowing them to kind of critically think about it versus what we've kind of pieced together throughout the years. I think there'll be more opportunities for them to really question and critique, you know, some of what we see happening today versus what was written back then.
Yeah.
One of the things, oh, sorry, did I cut somebody off?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, and just from the world history perspective in 6th grade, I got to teach ancient Rome, and there is stuff in there about, you know, the birth of democracy in Greece leading into Rome, and then also how that falls. So there is kind of like a comparison to be made there if, you know, if you're interested in that. There is,
Sure.
like, yeah, that is there.
And the presentation, and I think this might have been their kind of language, is sort of the connection of history to current events. And I'm wondering, is that something that's made explicitly as you're going through those things, or it's sort of up to the student or the teacher to make that connection, or what does that look like?
I got the impression it was a little bit more up to the teacher to kind of build those connections within the program. But what I liked is it's really easy to find modern day resources. It's less easy to find historical resources, and those were given to you. So at least there was that to pull from.
I would say also in like the model lesson structure, they do include like probing questions to be like, ask the class, like, how do they see this nowadays? Like, so the same thing in 7th grade, talking about the Constitution, Civil War, like, how do we see tensions nowadays when we talk about like things in politics? So they do include those in the model lessons, like questions to like engage students about, hey, what do you see nowadays compared to back then?
And especially one of the E's, so when you think about all the E's, it gets deeper and deeper, and the extend is where they give a lot of different types of activities that students can engage in, those investigations or those inquiries, and it can be document-based, it can be timeline-based, and they're providing their resources. And even thinking about their old textbooks versus what they have now, it's much more up-to-date and current. And they're constantly updating that as well. So I think the ways in which students can also engage in that inquiry, there's creative ways to do that. And they offer all those ideas for teachers to choose from and to also offer that choice to students. So they have that autonomy. And as Dr. De Leon mentioned, that's where the how comes in, with the teams collaborating around that and really thinking about their knowledge of students and what's going to engage them in a way that sparks that interest and brings that out.
Yeah, I'll talk logistics. We talked a little bit about content. So in order to get like teacher buy-in or staff buy-in, what's kind of the plan? I saw the timeline for how to get people to train between now and the start of the school year, but will it be voluntary, paid opportunities, or is this something that like teacher leads would be involved with? I'm just thinking of different ways to create buy-in.
Yeah. And I think that buy-in sort of had to start early on. So the meeting that we talked about during January, when we actually talked to the entire department about our 3 initiatives, we kind of started laying like the foundation for that buy-in. We actually gave the department an opportunity to think about those 3 initiatives and process them individually as a team, and we were able to engage in whatever questions they had about the process and moving forward. So I believe at that point, we really started to lay the foundation, and then providing the professional learning for each of the pilot resources. That was a part of the process as well. And then Casey and I had an opportunity to go into each classroom during each of the pilots to actually see it in action. And so we were able to have some takeaways as well. And so I think we're starting to create that buy-in now, but I think it continues on next year as we provide that initial professional learning again and follow-up coaching, and then even bringing Dr. Asif Wilson back so that he can continue some of the professional learning he had started with the department in terms of their instructional practice. So kind of started, and then we just need to continue that. And then talking with department chairs, I believe Jeff is in the audience, one of our department chairs, and so just making sure we continue that relationship with the teacher leaders as well as our building administrators.
To follow that up then, I think one of the things that was reminding me of, just conflicts sometimes that occur when we talk about social civics, history and current events and many of the democratic current issues. Oftentimes we'll have to be very reactive when there's a conflict between, a teacher presenting something that could be controversial and kids receiving that, going home, and then having conversations at home. I did see that there was an interest to develop some kind of collaborative efforts with families so that the conversation can be ongoing. I would love to see, that parent component or that family component so we can prevent any misunderstandings or things that could be sometimes, unintentionally bringing up like microaggressions or racial biases. The other layer of that then being that I wonder, they talked about on their website, something about courageous leaders. So I wonder in their professional development package, whatever it is that they're selling with the curriculum, if there is an opportunity to send some of those teachers to those opportunities. It sounds like it's where they ask some of those more critical questions about the curriculum and allow for project-based learning to explore some deeper topics that might be, just at the surface level in the curriculum.
Right, that's a great suggestion. So we are in the process of building out that professional learning plan. So we'll be working with vendors, that's if this is approved, by the way. We will work with the vendors to look at all of the professional learning that they provide, and if that is an area of focus, we could certainly look at that.
Sounds good. Thank you.
So I had a question for Ellie and Gabe. wanted to know, this is kind of like a different thing than you had before. Was it hard for you guys to figure out how to use it? And do you think kids like 8th graders are gonna be new to it that didn't get to do the pilot? Or did everyone get to do the pilot?
Everyone.
Oh, everyone did. It's so 6th, 7th, and 8th, they all got
Yes.
to do it. Oh, I thought there was just, you guys were the like pilot like we did that one.
Right,
That's
ELA,
okay.
right.
That's okay, you can still tell me if it was easy for you guys to get the hang of it, or it was hard.
It was, it took me like a minute, and then once I figured it out, I sort of knew what I was dealing with, and it wasn't that hard to figure out. It just, it just takes a little bit, and then once you're there, you're going. I mean, like any new thing, it's kind of like riding a bike. It takes a little bit to get adjusted to it, and our teachers also walked us through it, so it was a lot easier to figure out what we're doing. Once we were going, it was just, it clicked, so.
Well, and so, thank you for that. My comment was gonna be the 60-40 to me is really close, right? Like so I'm glad it was really easy, but I wondered, that was why I asked the question, because 40% of your friends didn't, they chose the other, they liked the other one better. So I was wondering why they did, and just, my comment would be, we maybe find out why those 40% didn't, and see if there's anything we can do to, maybe it was a misunderstanding, maybe it was about some specific thing that we could address and get in front of and be proactive about.
Anecdotal comment to that, I have never heard my daughter complain so much about social studies as she has in the last month. And so it's interesting, I wonder if part of it, from what she has said, it's funny because I didn't know there was a pilot until I got the survey. She was complaining nonstop, and she doesn't love social studies to begin with, so there's also that. But it seems like some of the translation of maybe what was in the materials to teacher practice was not great. And so there's always obviously a learning curve in interpreting materials to work in your own classroom, and depending on the instructor, that may or may not be less successful. But I did think that was interesting that the students were kind of like on the fence, and like I said, I think my daughter really struggled with this in particular.
So I guess I'll round this out for the first round. So thank everybody here, especially our students, because I know you guys can be doing other things with your time. So my, I guess, concern and ask is, we've talked about the importance of having multiple perspectives, and making sure that the content and the curriculum is culturally relevant and resonates. And so I would love to see more intentionality about like who the stakeholders are. And so different, like what did 6th graders say versus 8th graders, because I think if you ask my 6th grader, like their perception, who are so new to middle school, is gonna be so different than my 8th grader who thinks he knows all things politics. And then also just as an alumna of D97, or just a student in general, we've all been students no matter where we came from. One thing that resonates with me is, as a female, and as a Black female, when I would be in class and like having to do stuff about slavery or difficult times in African American or Black history, it always felt uncomfortable. And so just like not really seeing that type of representation here today, to see what those students were feeling, if they felt like it was culturally relevant, if they felt like they see themselves, if they felt celebrated, that to me is really important. Because, or even just being a female, right? When you read things about women's history, and the boys will make little jokes, and then you're kind of like, I just want to move past this, like I don't want to talk about it, because they would make little jokes. And so being that some of these subjects are going to be very sensitive, I would have loved to see like, this is like how these communities saw themselves in this. My son is actually enjoying social studies. My 6th grade daughter is not so much. And so I just think being very intentional about like whose opinions we're asking for is really important. And so I would just be interested in having those communities, because you mentioned that as like part of the goal, is talking about Black, Brown, Asian, and LGBTQ. And so to be able to ask those students, like, did you see yourself? How did you feel reading that? did you feel othered, or did you feel like comfortable having those conversations? Especially when it talks about like recent things, we are gonna have varying opinions. And so just to make sure that those students feel like comfortable being in those spaces.
Thanks for sharing that. Any second questions, comments? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you. We all have chairs. So we are.
Thank you.
Oh, no. We're moving on to the consent agenda.
I move that the Board of Education of Park District 97 approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Kurt Johnson,
Yes.
Josh Strickland,
Yes.
Spurlock,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Perez,
Yes.
Kim, Carney,
Yes.
consent agenda passed.
11.1 personnel report.
No.
Part of the consent agenda.
Yep, sorry. Individual and small group transportation contract.
So I know we have a motion, but I thought that Nancy's question was really interesting. And when I went back and read the agreement, are people that are participating in this transportation able to use their own vehicles, or is it only for student
Yeah, we can have Michael come up, and there is also a response.
Was there?
on the
I'm
board.
sorry, I
Yeah,
didn't
that's
have a
okay.
chance to
Yeah,
read
it's
it.
all right. But we can come up and make sure that if you have any additional questions as well.
Yeah, so in the response, I had linked specifically from their proposal. It kind of goes through like, what does the drivers look like and what are the requirements at a state level, but then what do they also go through from a first student perspective for their training? And then from a vehicle perspective, what does that look like? So they work with, there are a number of third-party contractors around the area. They will then work to source drivers, and then they bring them and onboard them into their company to work with. So they are not all their vehicles that they own, but they would be the drivers, but then they have to go through inspections, they have to have the certain criteria and all of the requirements that they would go through within their company to ensure that they are there, meet the standards and everything that do this.
So without being silly, I mean, how does a parent know that this car that pulled up?
So yeah,
Is
so
that-
part of the conversations that we had was very explicit, like, what does this experience look like? So going into this there would be conversations that the company would have directly with us to align this, but then would have with the families. Here's what the driver's name is, they're wearing whether shirts or lanyards or whatever to identify them. They would know exactly the car, color, make, model, like all of that information would be shared in kind of like an introductory call even before that first day. So they knew exactly who it was, to work would be consistent. Obviously, there are times that subs or something happens that they need to do that, but it's very, again, a big piece of this is the communication level, knowing and being very transparent, open, and having that communication with families. Again, being able to track different things. That all says that within the app as well, that the district would have, but then families also have that ability to see that app and see where the car is, tracking that, but also who it is, and when did they get picked up, when did they leave, and where they're at in that process. So ton of work and questions and back and forth with them around these similar questions and ensuring that. And again, feedback we've received from other districts when we did reference checks too, were very positive around this. Good.
I'm sorry I did not get a chance to see the response, so thank you. I do have, that just brought up another question for me. So who is responsible, or who's like the liaison within a district? So that if there is a communication breakdown, say, I know for example, the school buses sometimes have been late. So who is the person that then says, this van broke down, there was traffic, or whatever the case may be, to let the parent know if the app's not working or there's been a change in drivers or whatever?
Yeah, so we would have that from us internally and with Felicia, but we also do have, right now, McKinney-Vento, Myra Delgado is our McKinney-Vento liaison, and so she would be in direct contact as well. So really Felicia and Myra would be that, to be able to communicate out and work with families or be able to do any type of communication. There is a piece too, we did ask, like, what does that look like at a building level? Because they're that first piece, rather than going from a building to us, to them. But they're working with the company as having a direct person. And again, when we heard that from references, they named that person, that was the person that will be our direct contact too. Which again, gives another sense of comfort in, we know that who to contact and when and where and all of that, if anything were to arise. And then they actually are reaching out to us or reach out to the family directly if there are any of those issues. And you can, like, for example, within that app, if something where a student was sick that day, we can notify them and say, hey, actually can't cancel this trip for today, you don't need to go there. And they can do that within the app. But only changes in locations or any of that has to come through us. And those are all those conversations that we have with them. So.
Any other questions? All right, can I get a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve the 3-year agreement with First Student Transportation with the option to extend annually for up to 2 additional years at a cost of $161.85 per route per day, as listed in the contract.
Second.
Ross Jordan,
Yes.
Perez,
Yes.
Carney,
Yes.
Spurlock,
Yes.
Kim,
Yes.
Kurt Johnson,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
motion passed.
All right, any before we do the motion, does anyone have any questions or comments about 12.2?
I do, just real quick, I think we mentioned this, but I just wanted to highlight it. The cost here is $224, $622, $22. What was the prior cost? Did we have didn't we give the prior cost or ask about the prior cost to see if there was a difference? It's in the memo for the next one, so we don't have to ask. It's $10,000, we can say it at the table.
Yeah, I think Tawanda spoke to that last
She
time.
did, and I was, yeah.
I'm trying to think of it too. I could try to pull up. I want to say it was like 270.
Yeah, I think it's cheaper. I actually think it's
definitely
less
cheaper.
expensive,
It's
right?
definitely less
That's
expensive.
what is what I wanted to.
Yes.
And we went into based on the conversation too about the multi-year. We went back to
Right.
that, and that was part of the conversation. And it came out to be about $15,000 cheaper over the 3 years once we got
Okay.
a final multi-year agreement with it. So.
Yeah, so, yeah,
And
Venus,
it's
I want to make sure
5,000
you.
per year, not 15,000.
Yeah, so just to make sure that, because that question that you asked about about a multi-year,
Yes.
that was renegotiated, and there was a 15K savings as a result of that. So we'll continue to, be sharper in those negotiations. So thank you, Michael.
All right, can I get somebody to read a motion?
I move that the Board of Education of Oak Park Elementary School District 97 approve the agreements with Renaissance Assessment Suite for grades K through 8 for year 1 of the subscription presented on May 13th, 2025 at a cost of $224,622.22 for the 2025-2026 school year.
Second.
Kurt Johnson,
Yes.
Ross Jordan,
Yes.
Spurlock,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Perez,
Yes.
Kim,
Yes.
Carney,
Yes.
motion passed.
12.3, any questions about 12.3 before we vote? All right, can I please have someone read the motion?
I move that the Board of Education of Oak Park Elementary School District 97 approve the agreements with the technology renewal agreements as presented on May 13th, 2025 at a cost of $263,644.76 for the 2025-2026 school year.
Second.
Carney,
Yes.
Perez,
Yes.
Spurlock,
Yes.
Kim,
Yes.
Kurt Johnson,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Ross Jordan,
Yes.
motion passed.
And I'll just comment, that's at $10,000 more than the prior year, and Venus, the multi-year contract, ended up saving $30,000.
I think we ended up at 45K cheaper,
Total,
actually,
yeah.
with the 15K, that was renegotiated.
You're welcome.
So for 13.1, we're gonna skip that one. I would ask folks to go ahead. I sent you guys an email asking if you can review this in advance. And then any questions we're gonna send to Luis by June 2nd so that he has time to compile the questions and answer any questions that you have. And then we'll be asked to vote on this on June 6th.
And the policy committee looked at this and agree with the recommendations from Luis. I'm the policy committee, because
Not that
Colleen's
we
no
just
longer here.
trust you, but. All right, 13.2. School year annual audit services contract.
Yes, so if there are any questions, Yasmin Dada, the interim CSBO, is here to answer any questions you might have.
And we'll be asked to vote on that on June 10th as well. So if you have any questions, feel free to email. Okay. Sorry, 13.3. SY26 annual contract renewals. Someone presenting or?
No, but we can, if there are any questions, happy to take those.
No questions?
Oh, no, there's questions. What is the difference from can we get the financial difference from last year? And then my other question is, I thought some of this learning, because it does say ELA, was part of the curriculum we already voted on to add a PD element. So I was curious about whether it's duplicative.
Okay, so let me make sure I get your questions. We did put some of the answers to the question in the.
I only saw SY26, so maybe I missed it.
Okay, so let me make sure we get your questions, Holly.
Yeah, just what the difference is in cost year over year.
So we'll get that to you.
You had a second question, Holly?
And my other question was, some of the professional learning is ELA, and it's just difficult, there's a lot on here, and some of it looks like it might be duplicative of some, we just voted for ELA and math curriculum resources with professional development, and this is math, this is quite a couple of math things, as well as it says that it has an ELA component. So just curious about
where it's being categorized.
Yeah.
Because I had the same question around the Pearson assessment system, since
Right.
we just voted on the assessment one. If
Yeah.
that was just like a carryover, or like where it's getting counted. If it's there as like a place marker, if it's part of the full budget.
Okay, so let us, what we can do is revise this to kind of pick up those categories that you're asking. So it sounds like what was the cost last year if this is an annual? And
of each one of these categories.
of each one of them, what was the cost last year if it was? Also,
Like there's a couple line items that could be redundant or not. I guess that's what Holly and I are asking.
How do they
I guess we
relate to
just
the
got
new
new
curricula that
exactly.
were,
Like,
And assessments.
yeah,
And assessments,
curriculum
yes.
and assessments.
Yep.
how do they complement?
Are these additional
The
too,
superintendent.
or?
Yep. Okay, we can add a description there right next to each item so that you can see that in advance, and then if you have additional questions before June 10th, so we'll get that to you pretty quickly so that you have advance time.
Right, this
for
is just
follow-up
another one of the
questions.
big price tag.
Right, yeah, fair enough.
Can we
Absolutely.
ask for additional questions to be submitted by June 2nd?
Absolutely.
All right. All right, we're
Thank
done
you.
on that one? Yes, no, maybe so? All right, 13.4.
Yep, for this one, we have John Paulman, so he can come up and share information, answering questions.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, John.
So this memo speaks to doing a LED bulb retrofit in both auditoriums. So to give you a little context here, we started out with a big number. We had received a number from STR and CS2 of $800,000 to replace the two lighting systems. We're having problems with modules, and then the bulbs last about a year. So it's $8,000 to change the bulbs. So the retrofit is a specialized bulb made for theater and for our existing lighting units. The company that's marketing the bulbs, replacement bulbs, is also manufacturing the electronic module that goes into each dimmer cartridge. So we can keep that system running. They're also buying old inventory, refurbing things and making new parts as needed. Their intent here is to keep these going for a long time. The bulbs are designed specifically to work with dimming systems like ours. So while the bulb cost is significant, it's $52,000, so about $800 a bulb. Over the lifespan, they pay for themselves in electric usage pretty fairly, even if we get about 2/3 to 3/4 of the hours out of the bulbs that they're rated for. However, when you look at the cost of having to change the bulbs that we currently buy, that's where that's one place we make a big difference in cost. And the other is that we can extend the life of these dimming racks that, again, our estimate was $800,000 to replace. So we could easily get 5 to 10 years more out of these dimming racks with the parts that they're manufacturing and moving to this technology of light bulb. So it's my recommendation that we move forward with changing out these bulbs, and then we'll have fully lit auditoriums every day. And I think the price is well worth it. Again, Gavin made a comment earlier about, our long-term look at when we're making fixes. And this is one of those deals where this is a long-term look. This isn't price savings in the first year or two. By year 4, 5, 6, we're definitely in the green. And for the rest of the time, we'll have better working systems.
Does anybody have any questions?
I do have a quick question. So I love this. LED bulbs are great. My one question is, have you gotten references from folks who have installed this and/or have you seen this in person yourself? Just because LED and dimming sometimes do not always work really well together.
I have not seen this myself in person. We will, purchase a couple bulbs and make sure it runs through. The bulbs are actually made to fit our fixtures. So this isn't just kind of an off-the-shelf kind of thing. These are customed up a bit to make sure they do the right light dispersal by the shape of the lens, and that the overall length fits the fixture so the light isn't hitting the edges of the fixture before it comes out.
I just would add to that perhaps taking some of our arts folks, the orchestra or band, or Bravo or cast to see it also, because they are dependent on the way the lights look for their performances might be.
So
Right,
are
this is
these
auditorium, right?
the lightings or the?
This is the house lights.
These are the house lights.
Okay.
House lights.
All right.
Yeah. But still, I mean, you also don't want something that's like still partially on at the end, so it's just.
Nope,
Yeah,
that's-
I appreciate doing that.
Theaters though, right?
I'm sorry, what?
Weren't these were specifically designed for theaters?
They are specifically designed to go in these dimming systems. One of the things that's critical and you can have happen at home is from lack of a grounded fixture. You can have that dull glow even when they're off. That's from backfeeding. I won't get into the details, but it's backfeeding of electricity. They specifically want each one of these bulbs grounded. So it actually has a separate green wire to ground it to make sure we don't have those residual low voltage issues. And then, on top of the energy savings, with these modules then only running at 10% of what they were designed for, we should have a lot less issue with our existing modules.
Do we have, in the elementary school auditoriums, do we have similar lighting systems? Like, what's the status of what we're using in those, if you know?
I don't know what bulbs are in there, but we can reach them. And that's really the issue, is that in the middle schools, with the slope flooring and the seating where it is, we have to bring in an articulated lift to be able to reach the bulbs.
Got it.
The bulbs, for example, the middle schools, a whole change of bulbs is $600, $700.
Right.
So it's not about the bulb cost, it's about being able to access the fixture to change the bulb.
I just have one quick question. I noticed that you have like a company. Are there other companies that do this? I don't know if it's like going out to bid, but like,
Well, that's one of the things I have yet to vet, is make sure that I wanted to see where we were here. but is to see if Canto has any dealership restrictions, or if we can get products from Canto from somebody else, but I will make sure that through this process, we make sure we have the best pricing.
Alright, so that brings us to 14.1, concluding items, board remarks.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Oh, I did want to applaud the band, or the music director folks and all the chaperones that went on the trip last weekend to Ohio. I cannot imagine being trapped in a bus with 7th and 8th graders. My daughter had a great time, so hats off to those. And I think Dr. Glidden's also chaperoning the current trip for the 8th grade, so she's just a glutton for punishment.
For an excellent administrator.
I like those trips. I'm the only one, but I like field
I'm
trips.
sure you're not the only one.
I just want to applaud the band. So we had our final band concert on, I don't remember what day it was because I don't know what today is. But last week we had the final band concert and it was amazing. I love the way that they like recognize our 8th graders. You talked about the impact of like music and like where they've been and where they're going. And so I always enjoy the band concerts, even if I don't know the songs, but to see the progression of how the kids have grown has been really amazing.
You can understand why they get the Best of Award recognition.
Yes, definitely. No other remarks? All right, then we're gonna go to 15. June 10th, agenda proposed items.
So I don't think, and I won't be here at the June 10th, but I don't think the approval of the physical education waiver should be a consent item. I think that's a huge change for our middle schools, and that age group, we've been having PE every day, which I know ideally we would have everywhere, but we don't have the space or the resources to do it. And I do think that changing physical education offering should be discussed, kind of how we're getting kids active, how we're helping middle schoolers get a break. They don't have a playground, they don't have recess. What we're doing should be a conversation. I would have liked to have it on this meeting so that we could then approve it in a second meeting. Because it feels a little odd to do it at one time without a conversation.
So from the conversation that we had, it was pretty standard and typical, and there was a law that was changing. Am I misremembering?
So it's because of the new master schedule.
Right.
And as part of the waiver process, we do have posting requirements and things, so we're going through that right now. It's posted, and then we'll have the hearing. It's in a couple of newspapers, on the website, and so on. And so, if you would like, we can put it definitely as an agenda item.
Yeah, like I said, I won't be here, but I think that from a community standpoint, I actually think it's not standard. But, and we have been offering PE daily for middle schoolers for as long as we can remember. And when we do the waiver for elementary school, which we have done, this is middle school. When we do it for elementary, we've had the discussion that it's just physically impossible based on the size of our middle school. Like, we can't do it because we don't switch classes in the same way. And it still draws kind of a lot of attention. But there's recess, right? Those kids go out after lunch, they go out a couple times a day, so it's different. I think this is actually a fairly big change to middle schoolers' day and giving them kind of some time to move their bodies, and in light of kind of how we all know that's helpful to kids, it's helpful to adults.
So as part of the waiver application, we didn't need to talk about those things. We talked about actually, our schedule, how it impacts, and actually, we do still have social time, which is movement time, and so you'll see in the waiver, and we'll be ready to speak to that. Actually, I'll get that to the board beforehand, make sure you have those questions about what it really looks like. And breaking out some of the things that we had to put together for the waiver. So let us get you that by June 2nd as well, so that you know that, and then we can absolutely have it on the agenda, have a more of an open discussion if you would like.
Well, I was gonna ask, is there appetite from other board members to either like have this and be able to submit questions, or do people wanna have a discussion at the board? I respect what you said, but I also.
I don't
just
mind,
wanna-
I don't mind submitting questions, I'm not saying to discuss, I don't like that we're
Yeah,
changing the process of
I
not
think I
having 2
misunderstood
times to
what
talk
the
about it.
waiver was, and so I am a little surprised it's under the consent agenda, not something we were briefed more ahead of time.
Well, one question on this, and maybe I'm misremembering this, I think this is fine for a conversation, but right now, my kids are only taking PE every other day, like I thought
But that's
they
because of the
were-
block schedule,
Right,
yes, to your
but
point.
with the schedule next year, so to me, that was not as drastic a change, I think it's still
Agree with you.
worth having a conversation.
Do you want,
But can I ask really quickly, the timeline for this, I guess would be my question, because it would be great to have this as a public conversation if we can do it and all of a sudden we don't miss a deadline.
yeah, we do have a deadline. So I know that June meeting is our last meeting of the month, and so, our last meeting of the year on the schedule, so we do need to have the hearing and have action on that day. But again, happy to call Louise up here right now if you would like. We can answer questions and then, or identify questions,
I
and
think it would
then,
be helpful to get the application and just be able to give you questions.
yeah, I did send that in the
Oh.
board update, so that was
Okay.
shared with you. So I'm happy to reshare it, but that, this isn't,
It's in the
yes, so,
523 update?
it's in the 523 update under redesign for all.
Yes. This is the notice of public hearing.
Yeah, I didn't
I thought you said
see
there's an actual application that we had to submit that explained.
Yeah, and so the notice also explains, if you look, there's this
But
excerpt.
is it the same as the application?
I can see if it's the same, but it's the same information.
Anyway,
So it has the statute there.
Yeah.
And then underneath, what you can see is what we're requesting and why. So I can give you the actual template that it's on, but all of the key information about the
if
waiver.
it's the same info, that's fine.
It is.
I was just gonna suggest that rather than talk about it now, we just get in questions and then we can put it for discussion and action.
Yes, and my understanding, Alanya, is that correct? That is how we've done the waiver in the past?
The PE waiver has sat on consent agenda.
Yeah, I think just because of this.
But it was
shift.
elementary
Yes.
school one that we've had for years, like this is a change in our waiver. This is a middle school, like this is different than reaffirming.
Sure.
Something like that.
Happy to do whatever you'd like, so that's why I sent it to the board, and Luis is here. If we want to talk about it now, we can take your questions, whatever you would like, we'll be happy to respond.
Are folks okay with just like reading through this and submitting questions and then sharing out sharing out the questions and the responses? Okay, alright, let's do that. So going back, so we have the West 40
You're correct,
alternative.
Nancy, it's just switching.
West 40 Alternative Learning IGA renewal proposal to FY '26 board education meeting dates, approval of physical education waiver, district transformational goal area update, on the middle school career exploration update, the master facilities planning update, and then there'll be action items on school year '26 renewal contracts that we read about today. The audit service, social sciences curriculum adoption, Press Plus issue 118 adoption. And then there'll be discussion items on self-annual renewal and that clerk annual renewal. And just as a reminder for those action items, we're gonna try to get any questions in by June 2nd.
So you're gonna try to get questions in for self and click by June 2nd?
I'm sorry, for the action items that we're voting on June 10th. So those things that we're gonna be, self and click are just discussion items. We're not making action on those.
Oh, no, don't we usually vote on the same day for self and click? Because isn't that the
Insurance.
insurance stuff to vote on over the, because we won't meet until July, or I mean, until August.
So what's,
We're waiting on the final
Oh, okay.
invoicing, so, right now we have it agendized
as a discussion item. If we get everything together, then we'll move forward, let you update you that it'll be discussion and action.
So we'll get that as soon as possible. If it's after the 2nd or closer to the deadline, when do you need vote by?
I'll connect with.
Yes, when do we need a vote on self and click?
The invoices are due in July, so we'd like them approved in June if possible.
But if we don't get
We don't
them-
have the self invoices yet, so we're waiting on that.
Okay, so for click, we have the invoice?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so that we can do discussion and action on June 10th. And if we get the self invoice, then we will do the same on June 10th, correct? Okay.
So if we don't get the invoice,
If we don't get the invoice, we will need to wait until the August meeting.
I will try to get them to give it to us.
Okay. Okay,
anybody have any questions?
thank you.
Don't have board assignments on here?
We don't, because this is
Committee.
typically a committee of the whole, but you can report out if you would like. I can note it for the record.
Anybody have anything that's time sensitive to report out?
I will just say Glass Top Kindergarten was blast, as always, and thank you to our partners at CEC for welcoming and working with all of our schools to welcome in kindergartners.
Thank you. And thank you both for attending, and Gavin, thank your dog.
Let them know, I'll give you an extra pet.
Give him some extra treats, yeah. All right, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye. Where is the bus? So I can